Hey guys, welcome to the first of these Q&A videos that I plan on putting out. I want to thank you for getting your questions in. It's extremely useful for me to get an idea of the kind of topics you want me to cover. That way I can make the content a little bit more specific to the people who are actually listening. So let's go ahead and get into it. The first question we got is actually, I got a few different variations of it. So I'm just going to paraphrase it and ask, what's the role of accessory work in a program, or what role does accessory work play into a program? Like I said, different variations. We got different versions of this question. Some people referred to it as like functional bodybuilding. Some people referred to it as structural work. Other people were asking about it for like specific sports like weightlifting or powerlifting. So I'm just going to kind of lump it all into one thing and just talk about accessory work. Before I do that, though, it's important to note that the way that accessory work was being used in these questions is different from how I actually use the term accessory work. For me, that is just a movement that is being used to somehow support, aid, or assist a performance in another movement. So because of that, nothing is by nature an accessory movement. It's all going to be about context and the purpose for it being put into the program. So if I can take something like a front squat, and if I have a weightlifter, the front squat is going to be an accessory for developing positioning in the clean or strength out of the bottom of the clean. But I can take that same movement and program it for, let's say, a CrossFit or someone looking to do a local CrossFit competition. And if the front squat is something that's going to be tested, then my purpose for putting the program is to get better at the front squat. It's not to actually support their clean. It's not to support any other movement because that's a movement that's being tested. So any movement can be an accessory movement, and any movement can be a main movement. It's just going to depend on the purpose for you putting it into the program. What most people I think are talking about, though, are things like dumbbell exercises, unilateral movements, midline stability, and then I guess like more unique things like sled drags and farmer's carries and locomotion work. And my answer to that is yeah, I think that stuff plays a pretty significant role in just about any program. And I definitely think it's necessary. Regardless of what your sport is, I'm just a big fan of developing like good quality of movement and really good movement capacity. And I think that's really hard to do if you're limiting yourself to one implement. Can you get really strong and really fit just using a barbell? Sure. But you're going to be very limited in the way that you move and your ability to move across all your functional patterns. Let's go ahead and call them that, if that's the only implement you're using. So I want to expose people to a lot of different movement patterns, to a lot of different stressors, so that I can really cultivate their quality of movement. Also, no matter who I'm training, I want to develop as good and as strong of a base as I can. And I view the body as like it's a structure of tension, right? So one weak link in the chain is going to compromise performance farther down. So I think that a good way to target those weak links and to assure that the body is, this holistic strength model is as balanced and as strong as it can be. I think you're going to have to do things like single leg work or unilateral work, single arm work, or doing, stuff like sled drags and loaded carries and, different midline stability movements in order to make sure that the body is as strong as it can be. If we're talking about like GPP programs, so general physical preparedness, pretty much a program for anyone that isn't competing in like a strength sport, this stuff plays, I think, a little bit more of a significant role because, like, if let's say it's a field athlete, someone who's playing like soccer or rugby, or just someone who's trying to be fit for life, strength's not going to be defined simply as what you can lift with the barbell. It's a great metric, and it's certainly probably the primary implement that I use for most of my strength work. But for these types of clients, I need them to be able to express their strength. I need them to be strong, but then I need them to be able to express their strength in a variety of ways and under a variety of conditions. So yeah, that's great if you have a strong bench press, but what happens when I introduce dumbbells and introduce a new level of complexity and instability? What happens then? Are you still able to express the amount of strength that you develop with the barbell? That's going to be important when we're talking about field athletes because they're often in an unstable environment. They're often on one leg. They're often in split stances or wide stances. They have to be able to brace their midline and take on force while also pushing away. In life, anything can happen, so I want them to be able to pick up different objects off the ground. I want them to be able to pick up things with one leg, so on and so forth. I want them to be able to carry things. So for that stuff, we're talking about like a general physical preparedness, and they just need to be exposed to a variety of different movements. And we're talking about more specific athletes or more specialized athletes like weightlifters and powerlifters. This stuff still becomes important. Yeah, their sport is very specific, and they need to spend a lot of time with benching and squatting and cleans and snatches and all that stuff that they're actually going to be tested in. But like I said before, the body's only as strong as its weakest link, and we need to develop a good base or a good foundation before we start layering on levels of higher performance there. So yeah, like kind of go back to like the dumbbell thing. If I have someone who can squat 400 pounds, but they can't rear foot elevated split squat, 50 pounds in each hand, then that tells me that there's something off there, whether that's a strength deficiency between one leg or the other, or they just don't have the motor control to express their strength in a split stance or in like emphasizing one leg. So yeah, developing, adding 10 pounds to that lift might not directly translate to 10 pounds on a back squat, but I think that we are setting up a better base to build higher levels of performance if we spend some time doing this more structural style work. The important thing to remember is that you want this stress to be productive still. You don't want it to take away from their main sport or their main lifts. So you got to program it in such a fashion that it's assisting and aiding rather than taking up recovery ability. And the way you do that can be different. You can do that as like its own block of training early in the off season or away from competition. You can do it on its own day as sort of a general physical preparedness day or a structural day. It can find its way into warm-ups or just at the end of a session after all the intense work is done. But I think it's going to be beneficial to be in there for even those types of athletes. And then also just from like a longevity standpoint for just about everyone, whether it be general physical preparedness or these specialized athletes, hammering away at the same movements, I think just is going to be something that is going to burn people out or lead to injury at a certain point. So by just throwing in periods or throwing in these different movements, I think that we can just sort of help create like a more healthy training program. So that's all I have to say about that. I think it should be in there. Just program it intelligently and have a reason for why you put things in. The next question is, how would I go about how would you go about programming Metcons in a commercial gym? That's a good question because I'm in that boat. I train in a commercial gym. I don't train in a CrossFit gym just because that's what I have available to me where I live right now. You have to, figure out what your goals are. You have to get creative and you have to compromise. I think those are the three things. So goals are, are you trying to train to like compete in CrossFit? If that's the case, it's going to be hard to do because you might not have access or the ability to do everything that you need to prep for. So I know for me, I can't do anything with a barbell and a rower because those are in two completely different sections of the gym. You're not allowed to bring the barbell over there. So that might be a hole in my preparation if I were trying to compete in CrossFit. So when I'm looking at this is, if you're just doing this because you want to have conditioning and you want to have like a good general fitness program, then, you just have to get creative and realize that what you're used to doing, and you have to compromise because what you're used to doing in a CrossFit gym, you might not be able to accomplish in a gym, in a commercial gym or like a LA Fitness or whatever one you're going to. But you can still get some good training in. So I do a lot of work with dumbbells. I do a lot of work with, I do a lot of like rowing repeats with dumbbell work or body weight work. Same with like bike repeats with dumbbell work or body weight work. I do a lot more just structural work in my actual strength program. So if I'm doing like squats, I might do a lot of like single leg works, single leg work mirrored with midline stuff or loaded carries. So I'm developing like my ability to do multiple contractions and increasing my workout density. So it's kind of accomplishing the same thing, but it's not written as a Metcon, right? It's more focusing on movement quality, more focusing on developing muscle endurance, while also supporting my strength lifts. You can do things where, I think just getting rid of this like high intensity all the time mindset, and which I think you should be doing even if you're in a CrossFit gym, and focusing more on developing quality of movement and developing your ability to do certain patterns while under fatigue is going to be more beneficial. You can also ask yourself, do you need to do it? That's a conversation I have with a lot of my clients who kind of reach out to me like, I want to do these 2 cool CrossFit workouts, but I can't, drop weights, or I can't do all this other stuff. Or you're going to be limited by your space. So maybe you're better off just doing mostly focus on strength and structural work to develop muscular endurance, and then you're doing just traditional aerobic training for the actual conditioning. So, 30-minute bikes, row repeats. You can even throw in some like loaded carries or stuff like that to kind of make it a mixed modal thing. Or, just understand you have to compromise and you have to get creative. So it can be done. The last thing I would say is just be mindful of the other people at the gym. Everyone's there doing their own thing. I see a lot of people who like take up a ton of space and are doing like 30-minute long chippers. And that's just not the facility you're in. If you want to do that stuff, I think you need to go seek out a CrossFit gym and do a class if you want to do that kind of style of training. But yeah, intensity is not necessary, at least high levels of intensity all the time. You're not going to be able to do, big benchmark workouts maybe, but you can certainly use dumbbells and your own body weight and things like loaded carries and crawls and planks and all that stuff to develop really good mixed modal conditioning. I think you'll be better off for it rather than always doing barbell stuff. Kind of going back to the accessory work, right? All right, the last one that I'm going to answer is, how do I program mobility? Do I put it on its own days, or do it at the end of workouts? Gotcha. Mobility, not something I really program. At least not in how most people use the term mobility, because the range of motion of a joint is important and your ability to move in a certain way is important, but I think stretching and foam rolling is not the way to accomplish that. In fact, there's very little evidence, I think no evidence, that shows that it even improves like tissue quality or actually range of motion doing like long stretching and stuff like that. I think a better way to accomplish that is by training movement and exposing athletes to a variety of different movements and really working on technique and movement quality. I know I just said movement a lot, but I think that's a better way to do it. And then using more unique exercises like locomotion and hangs and stuff like that to move in ways that we're not used to doing and that break us away from traditional barbell movements, and strengthening those patterns rather than I'm just going to stretch. A lot of people don't even lack the mobility. They just lack the strength to get into those positions under load. And I think that's what most people are talking about. So, hey, do some bottom squat holds, spend more, get more volume in on back squats and front squats and overhead squats. That's what you want. Use, structural work to target specific gaps in your movement quality. So like barbell Z press, I think, is going to go a much farther or much longer way in developing your overhead mobility than doing like a band distracted stretch. That being said, if you enjoy doing that stuff, go ahead and do it, so long as it doesn't take away or limit your performance in your actual workouts. And I just don't think you need to spend a lot of time with it. Pick a few stretches, do them a couple times a week, and that'd probably be beneficial. That's just my opinion. All right, so that's kind of wraps up the answers to these questions. If you weren't able to get a question in, don't worry, I'll be doing more of these, like I said earlier. So I'll make sure that I put the information out there, how to submit your questions, and I'll keep these videos coming. And that's a wrap.